My online boyfriend I haven't met before sent me a check to help him cash it out. He asked me to keep 10% for myself. I was happy. I never knew it was a fraudulent check. You get used to the quiet, they tell you. At my age, you're supposed to find a kind of peace in it. Let me tell you something, child, that SLI told. By people who still have someone to call when the sun goes down. My name is Eleanor Johnson. I'm 73 years old, and this house in Atlanta, this beautiful, heavy house, is my whole world and my prison. Harold, my husband, my friend, the man who knew the back of my hand better than I did, has been gone 10 years, a decade. Some mornings I wake up and it feels like yesterday, the loss so fresh it steals the air from my lungs. Other days, it feels like 100 years, like I've always been this version of myself, the woman who lives. Alone, the loneliness. It's not an empty feeling, it's a presence. It's beside me on this old rose-patterned sofa, this sofa we picked out together when our backs didn't creak. It's in this room with me right now. It's in the way the clock on the mantel ticks too loud, marking time that doesn't seem to belong to anyone. It's in the perfect, untouched fluff of the pillow on Harold's chair. I can't sit there. That's his chair. Some part of me is still waiting for him to come in from the garage, wiping his hands on a rag, asking me what's for supper. My children, my beautiful Marcus and Lisa. Lord, they love me. They call every Sunday, regular as church bells. Lisa sends pictures of the grandchildren growing up so fast it makes my head spin. Marcus, my serious lawyer boy, he worries. He checks in, asks about the bills, the roof, my health. But I hear it in their voices, even when they try to hide it. The gentle hurry. They have lives noisy, messy, demanding live symphonies they're conducting, and my quiet little melody of making tea and watching the birds at the feeder is just a faint background hum to them now, and it should be. That's how it's meant to be. But knowing that doesn't stop the ache. It just makes it feel polite, something to be endured quietly, so as not to be a burden. I talk to myself out loud. I'll be dusting the frame around our wedding picture. I was so slim, and Harold looked scared to death and proud as a peacock, and I'll say, "Remember how Mama's cake almost slid right off the plate?" And the silence will answer me. I'll catch a ridiculous story on the news and turn, my mouth already open to say, "Can you believe this foolishness?" The words hit the empty air and fall like stones. The worst is the bed. A king-size bed is a vast, cold country when you're the only citizen. I sleep on my side, curled up, never venturing into the middle. His side stays made, the quilt smooth. I miss the weight of him. I miss the sound of his breathing, the little sigh he'd make when he was truly asleep. I miss the warmth. This house has central heating, but it doesn't make that kind of warmth. Sometimes I feel myself becoming invisible. I'll go to the grocery store, and the young folks are so kind. "Yes, ma'am. Let me get that for you, ma'am." But they look right through me. They see a nice old black lady with silver in her hair and a sensible purse. They don't see Eleanor. They don't see the woman who once danced the bus stop until her feet burned, who argued politics with fire at the kitchen table, who dreamed of seeing the autumn leaves in New England with the man she loved. That woman feels packed. Away in a box, like the good china in the buffet, too fragile, too dated for everyday use. So I sit in this chair as the afternoon light, that particular Georgia gold, slants through the lace curtains my mama gave me. I watch the dust motes dance in that last beam before it vanishes, and the loneliness. It doesn't just gnaw, it feeds. It feeds on all those hours, on all the words I didn't get to say, on all the simple, ordinary things that have become extraordinary because there's no one to share them with. The perfect red of a tomato from the garden, the silly antics of a squirrel on the fence, the first star at twilight. I was so tired of being just a memory to everyone else. I was so tired of being the past. I wanted more than anything to feel like I was still someone's present, like I could still be a future for somebody. That's the truth of it. That's the raw, hungry truth I barely admitted to myself. I was a 73-year-old woman sitting in a quiet house, waiting for a door to open, for a voice to say my name like it meant something more than just a check-in, for a sign that my story wasn't finished. And then one Tuesday, on that little screen my granddaughter showed me how to use, a door cracked open. A friend request, a man with kind eyes and silver hair, smiling in the sun, and in my deepest, loneliest heart, where hope and desperation are tangled up like old vines, I thought maybe, just maybe, the quiet was finally going to end. The silver-haired stranger, I almost didn't see it. The notification, that little globe icon at the top of my Facebook was easy to miss. Lisa had set it up for me years ago, so I could see pictures of the grandbabies without waiting for an email. Mostly I just scrolled. I saw recipes I'd never make, news stories that made my heart hurt, and old classmates whose faces I barely recognized beneath the years. It was another window into a world moving on without me. But this was different. The little number 1 hovered over the friend requests tab. My breath hitched just a little. At my age, a friend request is usually a grandchild's friend by mistake or someone from church. I tapped it, and there he was, Robert Miller. The name sounded solid, trustworthy, and his picture. Lord, his picture. He was standing on a wooden dock, the water behind him a brilliant, sparkling blue. He looked to be in his 60s, with a head of thick silver hair. The wind was tussling just a bit. He had kind eyes, the kind that crinkled at the corners like he smiled a lot. He was squinting into the sun, a faint, easy smile on his face. He looked real. He looked like someone who knew how to fix a leaky faucet and would bring you a cup of tea without asking. He was a white man, handsome in a way that felt classic, not flashy. My first thought was, he's clicked the wrong Eleanor Johnson. There must be 100 of us. My second thought was a flutter, a ridiculous, girlish flutter right in the center of my chest that I hadn't felt in 30 years. I stared at that picture for a long time. The silence in the room seemed to shift, to lean in closer to the glow. Of my tablet, what would Harold think? The thought came sharp and sudden. He'd want me to be happy. He'd hate this silence for me. I knew that as sure as I knew my own name. But this? Talking to a strange man online? It felt foolish, dangerous even. I could hear Lisa's voice in my head. Now, Mama, you be careful on that internet. There's all kinds of people out there. But then I looked back at his face, at those kind eyes. And I looked around my living room, at Harold's empty chair, at the clock ticking its lonely song. The loneliness, that heavy, familiar presence whispered, "What do you have to lose, Eleanor? What exactly are you protecting?" My finger, with its faint age spots and the little arthritis bump at the knuckle, hovered over the screen, over the confirm button. My heart was that old, forgotten drum again, beating a slow, unsure rhythm against my ribs. This was a door, a tiny digital door, and on the other side was a man smiling in the sunlight. I took a shaky breath. The quiet in the house was a held breath. I clicked confirm. Just like that, the door opened, and a message appeared almost instantly, a little bubble on the screen. "Hello, Eleanor. Forgive the forwardness, but your smile in your profile picture is simply radiant. It reminded me there's still beauty in the world." The words glowed on the screen. No one had called me radiant in a lifetime. I read them again and again. A warmth spread through me, starting in that fluttering place in my chest and moving out to my fingertips. It was a silly line. It was probably a line he'd used before. But in that moment, in the heavy quiet of my house, it felt like a candle had been lit. It felt like the first genuine personal thing anyone had said to me in years. The silence didn't vanish, but for the first time in a long, long time, it didn't feel entirely alone. The anchor and the poet that first message was like a pebble dropped into the still pond of my days. The ripples just kept spreading. He wrote again the next morning. "Good morning, Eleanor. I hope your day is as lovely as I imagine it to be. It was waiting for me when I woke up, my tablet charging on the nightstand, before I'd even put on my glasses. I reached for it. That little ping, that notification, it was a new sound in the house. It wasn't the clock or the hum of the fridge. It was a sound that meant someone was thinking of me. We started talking, not just a message here and there. We talked all day. It became a rhythm, a new, delicious rhythm to my hours. I'd be making my oatmeal, and I'd hear the chime. I'd wipe my hands on my apron and hurry over, a smile already on my face. It was like having a conversation with someone in the next room. He told me he was from Galveston, Texas, an engineer who specialized in offshore oil rigs. Tough work, he wrote, but it lets me see sunrises most folks only dream of. He was a widower. His wife, Susan, had passed from cancer 5 years ago. His children were grown, scattered, a son in Denver, a daughter in Miami. He was alone, too, out on that metal island in the middle of the sea. We found our common ground in the quiet spaces of a life lived after loss. He loved jazz, Miles Davis, John Coltrane. It's math and freedom all at once, he said. I told him Harold and I used to dance in this very living room 2 old Motown records. He said he loved that image. He hated cilantro, said it tasted like soap. I laughed and told him he was missing out on my famous salsa. He could quote Langston Hughes. He sent me a line one evening: hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. I read it sitting in my chair, the words so beautiful and sad they made my throat tight. How many men my age, white men from Texas, knew Langston Hughes? But it was the way he listened to me, really listened. I'd mention offhand that my azaleas were blooming a fierce pink this year, and he'd ask for a picture. I'd tell him I was rereading To Kill a Mockingbird, and he'd want to know my thoughts on Atticus Finch. He found my small reflections, my little opinions, fascinating. You have a poet's soul, Eleanor, he wrote one afternoon after I described the way the rain sounded on my roof. A poet's soul. Me, Eleanor Johnson, former secretary, grandmother of 4. I read those words, and a part of me that had been folded up small and tight for a decade began to unfurl, just a little, in the warmth of his attention. He started calling me his anchor. He said my messages, my steady, thoughtful presence, were what kept him grounded out there in the vast, lonely blue. The sea can make you forget what solid land feels like, he wrote. You remind me, Ellie, you're my anchor. The name Ellie made my heart squeeze. Only Harold had ever called me that, it felt. Cosmic, that's the only word for it. That out of all the noise and chaos of the world, this kind, intelligent, 60-year-old white man from Texas had found me, a 73-year-old black woman in Atlanta, sitting in her quiet house. We were 2 lonely souls who had built good lives, raised families, loved and lost, and found ourselves adrift. And now, through this little glowing screen, we were throwing lines to each other. For the first time since Harold passed, I felt not just seen, but perceived. He wasn't seeing the grandmother, the widow, the elderly woman. He was seeing the poet, the anchor, Ellie. The connection felt deeper and more real than anything I'd experienced in years. The fact that it was happening through typed words on a tablet didn't diminish it. It made it feel purer somehow. We were connecting mind to mind, soul to soul. The rest, I was sure, would follow. The silence in my house was still there, but now it was filled with the echo of his words and the sweet, aching anticipation of the next ping. Shadows on the screen. It started, as most doubts do, with a simple, reasonable request. I wanted to see his face, not the still, perfect photo from the doc, but the living, moving face that belonged to the voice in my head, to the man who called me his anchor. Robert, I typed one evening, my fingers fluttering with a nervous excitement. Wouldn't it be wonderful to have a proper conversation? To see each other? We could try a video call. The little dots appeared, showing he was typing. They bounced for a long time. Then his reply came. Oh, my Ellie, there's nothing I'd love more. Just to see your smile in real time would be the highlight of this whole tour out here. My heart leapt. But then the next message followed. But my camera on this old rig-issued laptop is shattered. Got knocked clean off in a storm last month. Nothing but a blank gray square. I've put in a requisition, but you know how slow corporate is. Disappointment, cold and slick, settled in my stomach. Oh, I typed back. I'm sorry to hear that. It sounded so small on the screen. It's a nightmare, sweetheart, he replied, his tone in text feeling suddenly warmer, more intimate. But I promise you, the minute I'm back on solid ground, first stop is a store for a proper webcam. We'll have our first date over coffee, screen to screen. It was a promise. It felt like a plan. I held on to it. A week later, I tried again. Maybe we could just do a voice call. Hearing you would be lovely. The dots bounced, then stopped, then bounced again. It felt like watching someone think in real time. Ellie, my love, the satellite internet out here is about as reliable as a weather vane in a hurricane. Voice calls drop every 10 seconds. It's pure frustration. It would only ruin the moment, and our moments are too precious to ruin. Our moments. The phrase was a bomb. He was protecting what we had. It made sense. He was on an oil rig, for heaven's sake. It wasn't an office with high-speed Wi-Fi. I scolded myself for being impatient, for not understanding the practicalities of his difficult masculine world. To soothe the sting, he sent more photos. A picture of him in a yellow hard hat, his silver hair peeking out, grinning broadly with a gigantic wrench in his hand. Another of him cradling a scruffy terrier. This is Rusty. He wrote, the rig's unofficial mascot. He likes to sleep in my bunk. The photos felt genuine, candid. They painted a picture of a full, rugged life. And then the voice notes. The first one arrived with a little speaker icon. I clicked it, and his voice filled my quiet kitchen, a warm, gravelly baritone tinged with a soft Texan drawl. Hey there, Ellie. Just finished my shift. Looking at a sunset out here that's all oranges and purples, painting the whole sky. Reminds me of that description you wrote of your hydrangeas. Thought of you. I played it 5 times. I closed my eyes and just listened. The voice matched the man in the pictures, kind, strong, a little weary. It was a real voice. It wasn't text on a screen. It was breath and sound and feeling. It felt like he was right there in the room with me, speaking softly just for my ears. The doubts, those little shadows, would creep in when the messages were silent for a few hours. When my logical mind, the mind that had balanced checkbooks and raised children, would whisper, "This is unusual, Eleanor. Be careful." But then he'd message or send a voice note describing the stars over the Gulf or quote another line of poetry, and the shadows would scatter. He was a practical man in a difficult situation. He was doing his best. He was my Robert. Soon, my love, he'd write, his words my nightly lullaby. Soon this contract is over, and I'll be on your porch with a bouquet of roses so big you'll need help carrying it. We'll build our life together, just you and me. I clutched that promise close. I pictured it, the porch, the roses, the solid reality of him. The voice notes proved he was real. The photos proved he had a life. The delays and the poor internet were just temporary obstacles, the harsh reality of the sea that kept my anchor from me. My job was to be patient, to be understanding, to be the steady shore he was swimming toward. The shadows were just shadows, I told myself. They couldn't compete with the sound of his voice or the dazzling future he painted in words. All I had to do was keep the faith and keep the silence in my house at bay a little while longer. He was on his way. The first crack, the cracks always start small, hairline fractures in the beautiful, gleaming surface of a dream. You can choose to see them, or you can choose to look at the reflection of what you want so badly to be true. It was a Tuesday. The messages had been sweet all morning. He'd described the sea as calm as a pane of smoked glass, and I'd told him about the cardinal pair building a nest in my magnolia tree. Then a new tone entered his words, a strain. The easygoing rhythm of our chat hit a flat note. "Ellie, I hate to even type this," he began. The dots lingered as if he was fighting with himself. "I'm in a real bind out here. One of the main circulation pumps went down. It's a specialized piece, and the company is dragging its feet on the replacement. But if I don't get it fixed, the whole project stalls and my final payout, it could be jeopardized. But if I don't get it fixed, the whole project stalls and my final payout, it could be jeopardized." My breath caught. I felt a surge of protective worry. "Oh, Robert, is there anything you can do?" "I found the part," he wrote. "Quick now. A supplier in Corpus Christi has one, but they want payment up front, less of a man." The words pierced me. This strong, capable engineer brought low by a stupid machine and a stingy company. He was trusting me with his vulnerability. This, I thought, is what real intimacy looks like. It's not just the poetry and the sunsets. It's showing the cracked parts, too. "I want to wire it to you," I typed, my fingers moving almost before my mind could process. "Just tell me where." You are an angel, he replied, the relief palpable in the text. A true angel. But it's not that simple. The wire systems out here are for corporate use only. For personal things, it's a nightmare of red tape. Could you possibly send it by Western Union? To me here in Galveston? My buddy on shore can pick it up and handle it. Western Union, that gave me pause. It felt casual, a little seedy, even something you used for emergencies, not for business parts. The shadow of doubt, the one I kept shooing away, flickered at the edge of my mind. Let me see what I can do, Robert, I wrote, stalling. I got up from my chair, my knees protesting. I walked to the little cherrywood desk in the corner, Harold's old desk, and pulled out my checkbook register. I traced the columns of numbers with a trembling finger, the pension deposit, the utility bill, the grocery money, the modest cushion for just in case. $2,500 wasn't a fortune, but it was a lifeline. It was the just in case. Sending it would mean scraping for months, saying no too little treats, holding my breath until the next check. I sat back down, the weight of reality a cold stone in my lap. The beautiful dream in the tablet collided with the hard numbers in the ledger. This wasn't a movie. This was my life. I picked up the tablet, my heart aching with a shame I couldn't explain. Why should I be ashamed? But I was. I felt like I was failing him. Robert, honey, I typed, each word feeling like a betrayal. I don't have that kind of money to spare right now. I'm so sorry. The silence from his end was absolute. No dots. No, it's okay. Just a blank white space in the chat window that seemed to grow wider and colder by the second. The clock on the mantel ticked. 10 seconds. 20. A full minute. I had failed the test. The first real test, and I had come up short. The poet, the anchor, was just a broke old woman on a fixed income. Hot tears of frustration pricked my eyes at my situation, at his silence, at the whole unfair mess of getting old and being alone and having nothing left to give. Finally, a single line appeared. I understand, Ellie. It was wrong of me to ask. Forget I mentioned it. But the tone was ice. The warmth was gone. The crack wasn't just in his story about the pump. It was right down the middle of the beautiful connection we'd built. The silence in my house wasn't just empty anymore. It was accusing. It seemed to say, see, you had one chance to be something more, and you couldn't even do that. I spent the rest of the day in a fog of misery. I'd ruined it. I'd shown him my limitations, and the dream of the roses on the porch, of the shared sunroom, withered and turned brown at the edges. The loneliness that returned was worse than before, because now I knew what I was missing. And it was my own fault for being poor, for being careful, for being old. The first crack had appeared, and all I could do was stare at it, waiting for everything to finally fall apart. He was gone for a day and a half, the longest silence we'd had since we'd started talking. Every hour that passed without that little chime felt like a confirmation I'd broken it. I'd shown him the worn linoleum of my reality, and the polished marble floor of the future he'd painted had vanished. I barely slept. I'd checked the tablet in the dark, the glow illuminating my worried face, seeing only my own last pathetic message hanging there. When the chime finally sounded, I jumped, my heart slamming against my ribs. It was early morning, the light still gray and soft. I fumbled for my glasses. It was him. My dearest Ellie, please forgive my silence. I was angry, but not at you, never at you, at myself, for putting you in that impossible position, for forgetting that the world isn't as kind to good people as it should be. The relief was so profound it felt like a physical wave washing through me, leaving me weak. He wasn't gone. He understood. The messages came faster, then tumbling out with a new, excited energy. The most amazing thing has happened, darling. The company settled the contract. The full payout is coming. After all that worry about the pump, it's finally over. I could almost see him, that silver-haired man in his 60s, smiling with triumph. My own smile broke through, shaky but real. Oh, Robert, that's wonderful news. I typed, my fingers clumsy with joy. It's our ticket, Ellie, our fresh start. Then a pause. The dots bounced. But there's a complication, my smile faltered. Here it was, the other shoe. It's the darndest thing, he continued, his tone shifting to one of frustrated practicality. Because of maritime tax law and the corporate structure of the rig's ownership, they can't disburse a sum this large directly to an individual offshore. It has to go to a stateside account. My accounts are all tied up with the Texas residency rules from Susan S. Stated as a whole mess, sweetheart, a real tangle of red tape. He painted a picture I could half believe. Lawyers, state lines, bureaucratic nonsense, the kind of headache that would frustrate any man. So here is my hope, he wrote, and I could feel the vulnerability coming through the screen again, but this time it was different. This wasn't a request for money. It was a request for trust. Would you be my angel? My partner in this? Would you let them send the check to you? To your address? Once it clears, you could just wire the funds to my private account here, and I'll be free and clear. We can finally begin. I read it twice, a check for his entire contract payout. He wanted to put it in my name. The fear was immediate. That was a lot of money. A lot of responsibility, but it was chased by a dizzying, powerful rush of something else. This wasn't him asking to take from me. This was him asking to give to us. He was entrusting me with his entire future. It was the grandest, most romantic gesture I could have imagined. He was saying, my life is in your hands. It was the ultimate. Proof of his faith in me, in us. All my daughter Lisa's warnings about internet safety buzzed faintly in the back of my mind like a gnat. But this wasn't some stranger asking for a gift card. This was Robert. My Robert. He'd shared his grief, his poetry, his voice. He was offering me the key to unlock the door to our shared life. This was what partnership looked like. It was stepping in when the other person had a knot they couldn't untie. It was building something together, brick by brick, even if one of you had to hand the bricks to the other for a little while, the crack from the day before. This was him sealing it with gold. He was proving that his dream included me, concrete and practical. He wasn't scared off by my modest means. He was inviting me into his abundance. Of course, Robert, I typed, the words feeling momentous. Of course I'll help you. Just tell me what to do. His response was a cascade of love and gratitude. You have saved me, Ellie. You are my miracle. I'll have the paperwork routed to you today. This is it, my love, the beginning of everything. I placed the tablet on my lap and looked out the window. The gray morning had given way to a brilliant blue sky. The cardinal was back in the magnolia tree, a bright slash of red against the green. Everything looked sharper, full of promise. The silence in the house was completely different now. It wasn't empty. It was anticipatory. It was the quiet of a stage just before the curtain rises. He was entrusting me with his future, and in doing so, he was giving me back my own. The loneliness didn't just recede. It packed its bags and left. In its place was a thrilling, terrifying, beautiful responsibility. I was no longer just Eleanor, waiting in a chair. I was Ellie, the angel, the partner, the woman who was about to receive a check for a future. The paper promised for 3 days. The world felt charged like the air before a summer storm. Every sound was the potential rumble of a delivery truck. I cleaned the house with a nervous energy I hadn't felt in years. I found myself straightening the lace curtains, fluffing the couch cushions, as if the check itself were a guest of honor coming to visit. My mind spun with 1,000 threads. Would it come by regular mail? Should I have given him my P.O. box instead? What did a check for that much money even look like? Robert was a constant, soothing presence on the tablet. It's being processed by corporate, my love. Just a few more formalities. He was so calm, so assured. It steadied me. He was the experienced captain. I was just the trusted port waiting for his ship to come in. On the 4th morning, a sleek express courier van pulled up to the curb. Not the familiar postal truck, but a sharp, uniformed vehicle. My heart hammered against my breastbone. I watched from the window as a young man in a crisp shirt and tie strode up my walkway, a flat, important-looking envelope in his hand. I met him at the door, my hands trembling so badly I almost couldn't sign the electronic pad. He handed me the envelope with a polite, impersonal smile. "Have a good day, ma'am." I closed the door and leaned against it, the envelope held to my chest. It felt warm, or maybe that was just my own blood rushing. I carried it to Harold's old desk like it was a holy relic, using the letter opener he'd favored to slice through the seal with a clean, decisive rip. Inside, on heavy, watermark-laid paper, was the check. It was more imposing than I'd imagined. In the top left corner was a corporate logo, a stylized blue crest with an oiled Eric. And waves. It looked official, serious. The print was sharp and black. And there, in the payee line, was my name, Eleanor Johnson. Not a typo, not a mistake. My full legal name printed perfectly. The amount was written in numbers, $120,000.0, and then again in words, $120,000.00100. I made a small involuntary sound. A gasp caught in my throat. I traced the numbers with a fingertip. The paper was smooth, substantial. This wasn't just a promise in a text message. This was a physical object, a document. It had weight. I took a picture of it with my tablet and sent it to Robert. "It's here," I typed, my fingers clumsy. "It's really here." His reply was instantaneous, brimming with a joy that mirrored my own. "Praise God. Our ticket, Ellie. Our future is right there in your hands." I knew I could trust you. I knew it. Our future. I looked from the check on the desk to the photograph of Harold on the wall. For a fleeting second, I felt a pang of disloyalty, but it was washed away by a tide of sheer, dizzying possibility. Harold would want me to be safe. He would want me to be happy. He wouldn't want me sitting alone, tracing the lines in my own hands. This check from this kind man was a bridge to a new shore. I thought of the sunroom we'd talked about, the one with the wicker chairs where we could watch the birds. I thought of the river cruise in Europe he'd mentioned, the castles along the Rhine. I thought of the simple, profound relief of never having to worry about an unexpected car repair or a new appliance. This was security. This was freedom. This was a love that didn't just speak in poetry, but acted with profound, tangible care. I carefully placed the check back in its envelope. I didn't put it in a drawer. I left it right there on the desk where I could see it, a talisman, a beacon. That night, I didn't feel the vast emptiness of the king-sized bed. I felt like I was lying next to a promise. The check in the other room was more than money. It was a testament. It said that I, Eleanor Johnson, 73 years old, was still worthy of a grand gesture, that my trust was valuable, that my life could still pivot on an axis of hope. The paper promise on the desk whispered to the silence, and for the first time in a very long time, the silence had nothing to say back. The next morning, I dressed with more care than I had in years. I chose a nice skirt and a blouse with a little lace at the collar, something Harold always liked. I applied a touch of lipstick, blotted it on a tissue. I wasn't just going to the bank. I was embarking on a mission. I was the keeper of the promise. I placed the check carefully in my best pocketbook, the leather one Lisa gave me for my 70th birthday. It felt like I was carrying a newborn, precious, fragile, requiring my full attention. The walk to the local branch felt different. The sun was brighter, the neighbors' lawns greener. I held my head a little higher. I wasn't just an old lady on an errand. I was a woman of means, a partner in a significant transaction. Inside, the cool, conditioned air smelled of money and lemon polish. I went straight to a teller, a young woman with a kind smile whose nameplate read Chloe. "Good morning," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'd like to deposit this, please." I slid the envelope across the smooth marble counter. Chloe took it, her professionalism unwavering. She pulled out the check, her eyes scanning it. I watched her face, looking for a sign, a raised eyebrow, a flicker of surprise at the amount. But her training was impeccable. She simply nodded. "This is a large deposit, Mrs. Johnson. It will take several business days for the check to fully clear and the funds to become available. However, we can make a portion available to you now." She typed swiftly on her keyboard, her fingers a soft clatter. She stamped the back of the check, processed it through a machine. There, the full amount will show as a pending deposit. You should see $12,000 available by end of day today. $12,000. just like that, available to me. Thank you, I murmured, feeling slightly lightheaded. I walked out of the bank, the receipt clutched in my hand. The moment I was on the sidewalk, I took out my tablet. My hands were shaking, but this time it was with excitement. It's done, I wrote to Robert. The check is deposited. They said it will take a few days to fully clear, but $12,000 is available now. His response was faster than thought, an explosion of digital joy. My brilliant Ellie. You did it! Now listen to me, my love. A gift for me. My breath caught. $12,000. It was more money than I'd held at once in. I couldn't remember when. It felt like a fairy godmother had waved a wand. This was what generosity from a real man felt like. It wasn't about me giving to him anymore. It was him providing, sharing his success with me. It felt rightful. But Robert, I typed, a flush of virtue rising in me. That's your money, from your contract. Nonsense, he shot back. What's mine is ours, and I want you to have something beautiful, buy yourself a new dress, something that makes you feel as gorgeous as you are. But Angel, there is one urgent thing. I need to secure the equipment for the next phase of my work, and the vendor needs a deposit. It's time sensitive. Could you wire the remaining available balance to my account? The one I gave you? As soon as possible. The request landed, but it didn't feel like a request. It felt like the next logical step in our partnership. He'd given me a king's ransom as a gift. The least I could do was help him secure his next job, the job that would bring him home to me for good. It was an investment in us. The gift shimmered in my mind, warm and dazzling. It felt like proof of his goodness, a token so generous it made any lingering doubt seem petty and small. How could I question a man who handed me $12,000 just because he loved me? I'll go to the wire desk right now, I wrote, my decision solid, clear. Thank you, my love, my practical, wonderful Ellie, my anchor at the bank's wire transfer desk. I provided his account details. The banker, an older gentleman with spectacles, asked the purpose. A business investment, I said, the words feeling grown up and important. As I walked home, the pocketbook felt lighter, empty of the check but full of potential. I didn't buy a dress. Not yet. I went to the fancy grocery store, the one I usually passed by. I bought a single perfect peach, imported and fragrant, and a tiny container of real whipped cream, a celebration for one, for now. That evening I sat in my chair with my peach and cream. I stared at the numbers. The pending deposit was the dream, the future. The available balance was the kiss, a fairy godmother's kiss bestowed by my silver-haired prince. It was real. It was in my account. The loneliness didn't just retreat. It was vanquished by the gentle, benevolent power of being provided for. I was no longer just surviving. I was, for the first time in a decade, truly thriving. All because a good man, a 60-year-old white man from Texas named Robert, had chosen me. The slow bleed, the fairy tale feeling lasted almost 48 hours. I floated through my routines, the numbers on my screen a secret, glowing joy I carried with me. I'd open the banking app just to look at it, not to do anything, just to confirm it was still there. Then Robert's tone shifted, the smooth, romantic captain's voice gained a new, strained note. It was subtle at first. Ellie, my love, a small hiccup. The message arrived as I was finishing my breakfast. The funds from the check are still in transit, but the port authorities here are imposing some last-minute clearance fees on my equipment. Bureaucratic nonsense, but if I don't pay, they'll impound everything. It could set us back months. My stomach tightened. How much? I typed, the two words feeling heavy. It's $30,000, Angel. I know it's a lot, but it's just a transfer against our pending funds. Once the check fully clears, it's all ours anyway. It is just moving money from one of our pockets to the other to solve a problem. Our pockets, our funds. The logic was seductive. The check was for $120,000. We'd moved $108,000 for his equipment. This was just another part of the same pool. It wasn't new money. It was our money, and it was needed. He'd given me $12,000 without a second thought. Could I begrudge him using $30,000 of what was technically still his to solve a urgent problem? but a cold, small knot formed in my chest. His response was immediate, a master class in calm reassurance. I know, sweetheart. I know how banks work. They make the funds available in your mind, but they hold it hostage with their pending nonsense. But listen, because the check is so large and from a corporate account, they've effectively guaranteed it. They've already credited it to your account. He sounded so sure, so experienced. He was a man of the world, of big contracts and international rigs. I was a woman who balanced her checkbook to the penny. Who was I to question him? The doubt was a whisper, but his voice in my head, the warm, gravelly voice from the audio notes, was a shout. I pictured his kind, crinkled eyes, full of trust in me. I pictured the roses on the porch. I thought of the word anchor. An anchor doesn't second-guess the captain in a storm. Okay, I typed, the word a sigh of surrender. I'll go to the bank. The wire transfer felt different this time. The banker, the same spectacled man, paused. Another substantial transfer, Mrs. Johnson, to the same beneficiary. It wasn't a question, but his tone was. Yes, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. It's for business. Contractual fees. The light tasted metallic, but I coated it in the sugar. Of necessity. This was for us. 2 days later, it happened again. Ellie, I'm so sorry. The penalty's accrued because the port fee was late. It's another $40,000. If I don't cover it, the whole deal collapses. Everything we've worked for. This time I didn't ask how much first. I just felt a sinking dread, a dizzying sensation like the floor was tilting. Robert. I typed, and even in text, my hesitation screamed. His reply was swift, laced with a pain that felt like my own. You don't trust me, just for words. They were a blade to the heart. After all I've shared with you, after I entrusted my entire future to you, I thought you were my rock, Ellie, my partner. The guilt was instantaneous and overwhelming. He was right. He'd given me everything, his heart, his dreams, his fortune, and I was balking at the messy, expensive realities of his world, the world that was funding our dream. I was failing him. Again, no, I do trust you. I typed frantically. It's a lot of money all at once. It's our money, Ellie, he wrote back, his digital tone softening, and it's saving our future. Once this is done, I'm done with the sea. I'm coming to you. No more delays, no more fees, just you and me. But I need you to be strong with me now, just a little longer. Our money, our future, just a little longer. I went back to the bank. I authorized the $40,000 wire. My signature looked shaky. The kind banker said nothing, but his silence felt loud. That night, I didn't check my available balance. I couldn't bear to see it shrink. Instead, I looked at the pending deposit, $120,000. It still glowed there, a pristine, untouched monument. That was the real money, I told myself. That was our solid ground. These wires were just temporary currents moving across its surface. Robert said the bank had guaranteed it. He said it was a technicality. I was in the deep water now, far from shore. The only thing I had to hold onto was his voice, his promises, and that pending number on the screen. The slow bleed of the wires was scary, but letting go of him, of the dream, of the first real hope I'd had in a decade that was unthinkable. It was just money, and he was my life. The red numbers, it was a Tuesday again. Funny how the worst days always seem to circle back to a Tuesday. The sky outside was a flat, neutral gray, neither promising nor threatening, just there. A mundane thought sent me to my tablet. The electricity bill was due. I'd been so caught up in the whirlwind of wires and promises that the practical rhythms of my own life had become a faint, distant echo. I needed to log in and schedule the payment. I settled into my chair, the rose-patterned fabric now feeling worn thin under my worry. I tapped the icon for my bank app. It loaded slowly, a little spinning circle. My heart, that old traitorous drum, beat a slow, thick rhythm in my ears. I wasn't looking for joy this time. I was just performing a task. No, the screen refreshed. For a moment, my brain refused to decode what my eyes were seeing. It was nonsense, a computer glitch. The numbers and letters swam in a sickening swirl. Available balance, 1185000. The minus sign was a tiny, brutal dash. The numbers were a solid, screaming block of red, the color of warning lights, of blood, of debt. No, I blinked hard. I closed the app. I took my glasses off, wiped them on my sleeve, put them back on. My hands were ice. I opened the app again. Available balance, 1185000. It hadn't changed. The red pulsed, not on the screen, but behind my eyes, in the suddenly too bright, too quiet room. A high, thin ringing started in my ears, drowning out the tick of the mantel clock. Pending deposits, $0.0. The $120,000 was gone. Not just pending, gone. And in its place was a hole, a canyon. They had let me send real money I never had, and now they wanted it back, plus fees. I made a sound, a small animal whimper ripped from a place deeper than my lungs. I fumbled for the phone, my fingers numb and stupid. I misdialed twice before I got the right number for the bank. I pressed the phone to my ear, my whole body trembling. A cheerful automated voice offered me menus. I punched O repeatedly, a frantic, silent scream. Finally, a human voice. "Thank you for calling First Regional. This is Stacy. How can I help you?" "My account," I gasped, my voice a dry rustle. "There's a mistake, a terrible mistake. It's showing a negative 118,000. "I can help you with that, ma'am. Let me pull up your account. Can I have your full name and the last four of your social?" I recited them, the numbers tasting like ash on my tongue. I heard the soft clack of a keyboard, a long pause. "Mrs. Johnson." "Eleanor Johnson?" "Yes." Another pause, longer this time. I could hear her breathing. "I'm seeing the activity here. There was a deposit for $120,000 on the 15th. It has been returned as fraudulent. The funds were never collected from the originating bank because the bank made a provisional credit available to you, and those funds were withdrawn via wire transfers. You are now liable for the negative balance." The words were like stones falling into a deep, dark well. Fraudulent, returned, liable. But he said, "The check was good. The bank. You said it was available." I was babbling, my mind scrabbling for purchase on the smooth, steep walls of her explanation. The funds were made provisionally available, Mrs. Johnson, as a courtesy, pending collection. The check was not honored. It was a counterfeit instrument. Her voice was polite, but it had cooled, hardened into a professional distance. I was no longer a customer. I was a problem, a liability. The wire transfers you authorized were for the full amounts. You will need to repay the bank the negative balance. I can connect you with our recovery department. Recovery department. The words had a final, terrible weight. "No," I whispered. "No, there has to be a mistake. Please. It was from Robert. He's an engineer." "Ma'am," she interrupted gently but firmly, "the check was fraudulent. I'm very sorry." "I'm very sorry." The three most useless words in the English language. They hung in the air of my quiet living room, which was no longer quiet but filled with the roaring of my own blood. I don't remember hanging up. I just remember staring at the red numbers on the tablet screen, their glow reflecting in my glasses. The minus sign was a wound. The numbers were the size of the debt. My debt. I owed more money than I had ever possessed in my entire life. I was 73 years old, and I was not just broke. I was in a hole so deep I could not see the sky. The beautiful blue-crested check, the kind-eyed man on the dock, the voice that quoted poetry, the promise of roses, it all crystallized in that moment into one single shattering truth. It was smoke, all of it, and I had traded the solid ground of my modest, lonely life for it. I looked from the red screen to Harold's empty chair. The silence that returned was not the old, familiar loneliness. This was something new. This was the silence of absolute ruin. It was the sound after the explosion, when the dust is still settling and you realize everything you owned is gone. The second theft, the woman from the recovery department, was named Lydia. Her voice was not unkind, but it was relentlessly factual, a steady drip of cold water on the smoldering wreckage of my mind. I sat at Harold's desk, the phone pressed to my ear, a pen poised over a blank notepad as if I could somehow write down and contain this nightmare. Mrs. Johnson, we need to discuss a repayment plan for the negative balance, Lydia began. However, a more pressing issue has been flagged on your file. More pressing? I echoed, the words barely a breath. What could be more pressing than a debt that would outlive me? Yes. Our fraud detection system has identified a recent inquiry tied to your Social Security number. It appears an online loan application was submitted 2 days ago to a lender called Quicksilver Advance. The room tilted. I never applied for a loan. I would never. The application used the pending $120,000 deposit from the fraudulent check as stated income and collateral, she continued, her tone suggesting she'd seen this script before. It listed this address. The contact email and phone number on the application, however, are not the ones we have on file for you. I thought I might be sick. I laid the phone down for a second on the desk, putting my head between my knees, the world a swirling gray. I picked it back up. What are you saying? It appears, Lydia said carefully, that the individual who orchestrated the fake check scheme also used the personal information you likely shared over time, your full name, address, date of birth, Social Security number, to attempt to secure additional financing in your name. The loan was disbursed to a digital account we cannot trace. I remembered the conversations. Robert, my sweet Robert, asking gentle, getting to know you questions over months. What was your maiden name, my love? Just so I can feel I know all of you. Your birthday is in June? A summer rose. I'd even joked about my terrible memory for numbers when he'd asked, ever so playfully, for the last 4 digits of my social for a silly compatibility quiz he saw online. He'd made it feel like intimacy, like building a shared history. It wasn't intimacy. It was data collection, every shared memory, every traded fact had been a brick he used to build a cage of debt around me. The first theft was the money I never had. This was a second, deeper, more violating theft. He had stolen my financial identity. My credit, which I had kept spotless through Harold's illness, through my retirement, was now a tool he had used. He had taken the bones of my life, my name, my number, my history, and puppeted them to rob me blind, the loan. Is it? Do I owe that too? My voice was a ghost of itself. You will need to dispute it directly with Quicksilver Advance and file a police report for identity theft. But yes, initially you are liable. Liable. The word had a new, more terrible dimension. I was liable for a dream sold to me by a phantom. I was liable for my own trust, for my own loneliness, for the simple human need to be loved that he had identified, targeted, and monetized. I hung up the phone. I didn't cry. The shock was too deep, too systemic for tears. It was a numbness that started in my core and spread out to my limbs. I looked at my hands resting on the polished wood of Harold's desk. These were the hands that had rocked babies, planted gardens, held my husband in his final hours. Now, in the eyes of banks and lenders, they were the hands of a mark, a dupe, a 73-year-old black woman who was so desperate for a white man's attention that she let him pick her clean. The shame was a physical weight, pressing me down into the chair. It was hotter and more suffocating than the loneliness had ever been. The loneliness had been an empty space. This shame was a polluted, toxic flood filling every crevice of my being. He hadn't just taken my present and my future. He had ransacked my past, using the precious details of my long life as the passcodes to my ruin. The poet's soul he'd admired. He'd used it to write a tragedy in my name, the anchor he claimed to need. He'd used me to sink his own hooks in deep until I was tethered to the ocean floor of debt. The silence in the house was now a courtroom silence. A judgment had been passed. I was guilty of hope, of need, of forgetting for a moment that the world could be cruel in ways I had never allowed myself to imagine. The second theft wasn't just money. It was my story. He rewrote my final chapters from one of quiet dignity to a cautionary tale of senile folly, and he signed it with my own stolen name. This response is AI-generated, for reference only, the digital ghost. He vanished. Not with a bang, not with a final, cruel message. That would have been a mercy, a clean, hateful break. No, Robert, the silver-haired man with the crinkled eyes and the warm voice simply dissolved. It was the silence that told me first. The ping that had orchestrated my days for months didn't come. Not that morning, not. That afternoon, I sent a message, just one, Robert, please. The bank called. The check was fake. It's at there, marked sent, but not delivered. The little icon that usually showed he'd seen it remained stubbornly blank, as if the message was floating in a void, seeking a recipient who no longer existed. I went to his Facebook profile, my heart a frantic, caged bird. The page loaded, but the smiling man on the dock was gone. In his place was a gray, featureless silhouette, a default avatar. The name Robert Miller still floated above it, but it was just text now, disconnected from any face. All the photos, the hard hat, the dog Rusty, the sunset from the rig had evaporated into digital ether. His friends list was empty. His timeline was a barren field. He was a digital ghost, a construct of stolen photographs, a synthesized voice, and carefully crafted texts now deleted from the server. The man I had loved, the man I had planned a future with, had never been more substantial than pixels on a screen. He was a puppet, and the puppeteer had cut the strings and walked away, leaving me holding the empty, hollow costume. I played the voice notes, the ones I had saved because they felt so real, so intimate. Hey there, Ellie. Just finished my shift. The warm, gravelly baritone filled the room, talking about sunsets and hydrangeas. It was the voice of my beloved, but now, listening, I heard the faint, unnatural flatness in the cadence. Had it always been there? Was it even a real voice, or something made by a machine? I couldn't tell any more. The sound that had been my comfort was now a source of exquisite torture. I deleted them, every one, erasing the ghost's voice from my world, but not from my memory. The photos were likely some other poor soul's pictures, lifted from a real oil worker's profile or from a stock image site. The kind eyes that had gazed at me with such imagined affection belonged to a stranger or to no one at all. The poetry, the shared loneliness, the plans for a sunroom, all of it was plagiarized from 1,000 other scams, tailored to the profile of a lonely, elderly black woman. The loneliness that returned was not the one that had left. That old loneliness had been a blank canvas. This new desolation was a canvas defaced, smeared with the ugly graffiti of my own gullibility. It was colder, sharper, laced with a profound and sickening shame that coated my tongue. I had not just been alone. I had been a fool. A desperate old fool. The poet's soul he'd admired was just a gullible mark. The anchor was just a convenient hook. I wandered through my house, touching familiar things, the smooth back of Harold's chair, the cool surface of the kitchen counter. They felt alien now. I felt alien in my own skin, the woman who had danced with Harold, who had raised children, who had survived 7 decades with her dignity intact. That woman felt like a story I'd once been told. In her place was this new creature, humiliated, indebted, stripped bare by a phantom. I was alone again, but this time I was alone with the mocking echo of a voice that never was, and the crushing weight of a debt that was all too real. The ghost was gone, but he had haunted my future, mortgaged it, and left me to pay the price in a currency of shame and regret. The door he had opened didn't lead to a sunlit porch. With roses, it led here to this silent, ruined room where the only presence left was the ghost of my own poor judgment. The stolen narrative, the financial ruin, is a mountain they tell me I must climb. At 73, my knees ache from the very thought of the incline. The bank's recovery department sends letters with cold, official language. The quick silver advance people call with robotic persistence. Their voices a recorded echo of the debt. My son, Marcus, cephalizes in from Chicago. I see it in his eyes the moment he walks through. The door, the shock, then the frantic lawyer brain whirring into action, and beneath it all, a wounded confusion that I, his sensible mother, could have done this. He speaks of affidavits, of police reports, of the long uphill battle to dispute the identity theft. His words are a blueprint for a fight I don't have the strength to wage. The numbers on his legal pad are just as abstract and terrifying as the red ones on my screen. My daughter, Lisa, cries when I tell her over the phone. She doesn't mean to, but her tears are salt in the wound. Mama, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me see him? Her hurt is a live wire. I have no answer that doesn't sound like the confession of a mad woman. I have stolen my children's peace, and that is a debt no payment plan can cover. But the money, the crushing, impossible sum of it, is not the deepest wound. The deepest wound is the theft of my own story. For 73 years, I was Eleanor Johnson. I was Harold's sweetheart, a girl who laughed so hard she snorted. I was Marcus and Lisa's mother, who bandaged knees and explained history homework. I was a secretary with a sharp eye for detail, a neighbor who shared cuttings from her. Garden, a grandmother who made the world's best peach cobbler. My story was one of ordinary love, of resilience, of a life built with care and weathered with grace. He didn't just take my savings. He took that narrative, that carefully lived life, and he rewrote the ending. Now, in the eyes of the bank, I am account #7342-991 delinquent. To the loan company, I am a case file, a social security number attached to a fraudulent application. To the detective who takes my report with a weary politeness, I am another statistic, another senior victim of a romance scam. It happens more than you'd think, he says, and his kindness is a blade. And to myself, who am I now? I am the woman who traded a lifetime of common sense for the sound of a fabricated voice. I am the lonely old black woman who let a fictional white man with kind eyes and silver hair clean her out. I am the cautionary tale. My final chapter is no longer about quiet contentment or legacy. It is a warning printed in bold red letters. Don't be this fool. The man I knew as Robert, the 60-year-old engineer, the widower. The jazz lover was a character, a ghost writer, and he wrote me into a script I never would have chosen. He took my loneliness, that raw human ache I carried so privately, and he turned it into a weapon to be used against me. He made a romance out of my need for connection and a tragedy out of my trust. The silence in my house is absolute now. It's the silence of a story that has been told, and the ending is wrong. I sit in my chair, but I don't look at Harold's photo anymore. The shame is a barrier between me and the woman I was in that picture. The future is not a sunroom or a river cruise. It is a narrow path of repayment plans, of whispered explanations, of the constant internal replay of my own blindness. He is gone, a digital ghost, but he succeeded in the worst possible way. He didn't just get my money, he took my sense of self. He robbed me of the peaceful, dignified end to my own story I thought I had earned. In its place, he left a ledger of debt and a narrative of folly, signed not with his fake name, but with my very real, very stolen one. The final theft was the pen from my own hand. This response is AI generated for reference only. Chapter 14, rounding up the story and saying thanks for watching. Share with friends and family so they can be aware and not fall victim, and subscribe for more videos. A final word, the scene is no longer Eleanor's living room. Instead, she sits in a simple, comfortable chair against a plain, neutral background. A soft light falls on her face, which now carries a profound weariness, but also a hard-won clarity. She speaks directly to the camera, her hands folded gently in her lap. Eleanor, my name, as you know, is Eleanor Johnson. I am 73 years old. The story I have just told you is mine, every painful, shameful, heartbreaking word of it. For weeks, I didn't know if I could ever speak of this. The humiliation was a blanket I wanted to pull over my head forever. But my children, God bless them, helped me see that my silence only gives that ghost, that phantom who called himself Robert, more power, and it leaves others in the dark where he likes to hunt. So I am speaking. Now, not just as a victim, but as a woman who is still here. Bruised, yes. Broken in places, absolutely, but still here. I want you to hear my voice and see my face, a real face, not a stolen profile picture. I want you to understand that this can happen to anyone who has ever felt a little too alone, a little too forgotten, a little too hopeful. It is not a story of stupidity. It is a story of human need, expertly and ruthlessly exploited. They target your heart, not your intellect. They study you. They become the perfect mirror, reflecting back exactly what you long to see. And by the time the red numbers appear on the screen, they have already stolen so much more than money. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: guard your details like the treasures they are. Question the too perfect connection, especially if the camera never works. Talk to your people, your family, your friends about the new, wonderful person in your life, even if you're embarrassed. A second pair of eyes can see the shadows you might be ignoring. And if you are watching this and you see a loved one, a parent, a grandparent, an aunt, a friend glowing a little too brightly at their phone, talking about a new special someone they've never actually met, please step in gently, lovingly, but step in. Our loneliness can make us deaf to reason, and we need you to be our voice of clarity. I am walking a long road back. The debt is a heavy chain, but I will walk it. I am choosing to reclaim my story. This chapter, this final chapter, is mine to write. Thank you for listening, for watching, for letting me break my silence. If my story can shield even one person from this pain, then some good will have been wrestled from the wreckage. Share this. Share it with your friends, your family, your community. Let's pull back the curtains and shine a light in these dark corners. Awareness is the first and strongest armor. Take care of yourselves and of each other, and please be safe out there. A final, small, resilient smile, a nod, goodbye.